Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York was buzzing with activity. Rolling suitcases clattered on the floor, shrill announcements blared through the terminals, and hurried passengers rushed toward their gates. In this orderly chaos, some details went unnoticed, but that day, an unexpected confrontation would capture everyone's attention. Marcus Bennett, 42, a black, experienced pilot, and discreet billionaire, walked confidently toward the gate for New York-LA Flight 781. His immaculate uniform, polished shoes, and gold wings on his chest betrayed his position as captain. Yet, he was not just a pilot. Marcus was the founder and owner of Bennett Aviation, one of the most respected and influential airlines in the United States. Despite his wealth and power, he had chosen to remain discreet about his business activities, preferring to focus on what he loved, flying. A few meters away, Tiffany Reynolds, the head flight attendant, walked along the aisle directing her team. Blonde, elegant, strict, and known for her authoritarian temperament, she had always struggled to hide her judgments of those who didn't meet her standards. She liked control, order, and respect for hierarchy, and she wasn't subtle when it came to imposing her will. When her eyes fell on Marcus, something inside her tensed. A black pilot, calmly walking toward the cockpit, seemed to defy her perception. In her mind, competence and authority had a certain face. Without thinking, Tiffany positioned herself in his path. "Sir, you cannot enter the cockpit now. Wait until everything is ready," she said in an authoritative voice, loud enough to make a few passengers turn around. Marcus smiled slightly, a polite but firm smile. "I'm the chief pilot for this flight, everything is already programmed and ready. I just need to check the final checks before boarding." Tiffany raised her eyebrows suspiciously. "Excuse me? I won't allow you to enter like that. There are procedures to follow." The tone quickly escalated, and some passengers began to murmur. Marcus felt the tension rising, but he remained calm, weighing each word. He knew that any hasty reaction could be misinterpreted. But he didn't yet know that Tiffany, by publicly challenging him, would set off a chain of events that would expose not only her prejudices, but also her complete ignorance of Marcus's true identity. In the air thick with the smell of coffee, luggage, and engines, humiliation began to take shape. But that day, the truth would unexpectedly burst forth, revealing to everyone that appearances could be deceiving and that power is never measured by skin color. Boarding proceeded at a brisk pace. Families, hurried business travelers, and a few weary tourists made their way toward the jetway. Marcus Bennett advanced calmly, his rolling carry-on suitcase behind him. Each step was measured, his face displaying an almost regal serenity. Yet, beneath his composure, an invisible tension was building. Tiffany Reynolds, the chief flight attendant, stood straight by the cockpit door, monitoring the crew's movements. When she saw Marcus approach, her face hardened. "Mr. Bennett. I mean, pilot, you can't enter the cockpit now," she said, her sharp voice echoing down the corridor. Marcus stopped and gave him a slight smile, polite but firm. "I'm the captain of this flight. I need to check the systems before takeoff. Everything is already programmed and ready." Tiffany, however, wouldn't hear of it. She raised her voice in front of the passengers waiting to board. "Look at this. This pilot is cutting in front of everyone, like. She searched for her words, hesitated, but the underlying insult was clear. "Like it's normal for him to be here." The passengers exchanged surprised glances. A few murmurs arose, some shocked by the scene, others fascinated by this little drama unfolding before their eyes. Marcus felt a pang of humiliation, but he showed nothing. He knew that losing his temper would be exactly what Tiffany wanted. "Tiffany, please," Marcus said, his voice soft but authoritative. "I assure you I am the pilot of this flight. Everything is in order. You can check my credentials if necessary." But Tiffany, confident in her power, made a theatrical gesture toward the cockpit. "No. I won't let someone, who hasn't followed the rules, walk in like that. You should, you should wait your turn. At that moment, a group of passengers began filming the scene on their phones. The murmur turned into a louder whisper. Why is that flight attendant talking to a pilot like that? It's strange, he seems competent. Marcus took a deep breath. He knew he had to remain calm, even if Tiffany continued to publicly humiliate him. He stood tall, head held high, radiating a quiet confidence and dignity that no one could shake. But what he didn't yet know, and what Tiffany couldn't even imagine, was that the story was about to take a dramatic turn. It wasn't just any pilot she was humiliating in front of everyone. It was Marcus Bennett, billionaire and founder of Bennett Aviation, a man whose name could determine the professional future of any employee at the company, including Tiffany herself. The conflict had only just begun. After the tense exchange near the cockpit, the atmosphere on board was thick with almost palpable tension. Marcus remained calm, observing the movements around him. The passengers, intrigued, murmured amongst themselves, some discreetly raising their phones to film the scene. Tiffany Reynolds, still confident in her authority, seemed oblivious to the skeptical glances following her. She adjusted her uniform, raised her chin, and gave Marcus a stern look. I repeat, you are not allowed to enter now. You must wait until I give the go-ahead. Marcus, patient but firm, replied, Tiffany, I am the captain of this flight. All procedures have been followed. I must check the cockpit before full boarding. I assure you that I am competent and fully qualified to do so. But Tiffany, instead of calming down, felt challenged by his quiet confidence. She raised her voice so all the passengers could hear. How can you talk like that? You don't even respect the rules. I'm in charge here, and I won't let you cut in front of me. At that moment, an elderly passenger, sitting near the door, dared to intervene. Excuse me, but this pilot seems to know what he's doing. Why humiliate him in front of everyone? Tiffany, furious, gave him an icy look and retorted, that's none of your business. The murmurs in the cabin intensified. Some passengers were clearly irritated by Tiffany's behavior. Others tried to calm the situation, but the air was electric. Marcus, for his part, remained upright and serene, his composure highlighting the contrast with the growing agitation around him. As Tiffany continued her antics, one of the crew members intervened timidly. Tiffany, perhaps we should check the captain's papers, just to avoid a misunderstanding. Tiffany, red with anger and wounded pride, shook her head. No. I know what I'm doing. I refuse. At that moment, a business-class passenger whispered to her neighbor, you know, it doesn't seem right to me, look how calm he is, he must be very experienced. That's when the tension reached its peak. Several passengers stood up to observe more closely, some recording the scene on their phones. Tiffany, sensing she was losing control of the situation but refusing to back down, intensified her accusations, insinuating that Marcus might not be qualified to pilot the flight. Marcus, in a measured but firm tone, finally said, Tiffany, I am asking you one last time to allow me access to the cockpit. This is not a question of power or arbitrary rules. It is a question of safety for the passengers, including yourself. There was a moment of silence. All eyes were on them. Some passengers exchanged perplexed glances, shocked by Tiffany's behavior and impressed by Marcus's composure and dignity. But Tiffany, proud and stubborn, still refused to back down. She didn't yet know that this confrontation would reveal much more than her prejudices. It would expose to everyone her complete ignorance of Marcus Bennett's true identity, and the shock of this revelation would be monumental. As the silent chaos intensified, Marcus remained motionless, straight as a ramrod, breathing calmly. Tiffany Reynolds, now at her wit's end, crossed her arms and cast one last contemptuous glance. You think you can defy me and speak to me like that in front of everyone? Marcus took a deep breath, then spoke in a calm but firm voice, very well. Since you seem to have doubts about my competence, I will clarify the situation. I am Marcus Bennett, owner and founder of Bennett Aviation. And I am the chief pilot of this flight. Silence fell immediately in the cabin. The murmurs ceased, and Tiffany paled almost instantly. The shocked passengers exchanged incredulous glances. The woman seated in business class let out a small, "Oh my God." Tiffany, unable to speak for a few seconds, stammered, "It's impossible, you're the owner?" Marcus nodded gently. "Yes. And your behavior towards me, as well as your attempt at public humiliation, is not only unacceptable but completely inappropriate." A few indignant passengers began to protest. "She treated you like that just because of, what exactly?" Marcus didn't answer immediately, letting the weight of the revelation and the silence take hold. Tiffany, meanwhile, felt shame rising within her. Her cheeks were flushed, and her mouth remained slightly open, unable to formulate a defense. A young passenger checking in dared to say, "You can't do that to a pilot, let alone him, the owner." Others nodded in agreement, some even applauding quietly. Tiffany's authority crumbled live on air, and her face expressed both disbelief and panic. Marcus, with icy patience, continued, "I'm going to give you a simple lesson. Competence, dignity, and respect are not measured by appearances. Your prejudice and arrogance have caused you to lose all credibility with the passengers and crew." The crew, who had watched the scene nervously, moved closer to Marcus to support him. Tiffany, isolated, was immediately ordered by the staff to leave and await a discussion with management. Several passengers applauded Marcus, admiring his calm and composure in such a humiliating situation. Some were already live-streaming on social media, filming the confrontation and Tiffany's reaction. Soon, the incident would go viral, illustrating how prejudice and ignorance can lead to absurd public humiliations. Marcus didn't let victory go to his head. He looked at Tiffany and said, "This situation isn't a personal punishment. It's a reminder, respect and dignity are never negotiable. And next time, I hope you'll think twice before judging someone without knowing the whole truth." Tiffany, humiliated and now fully aware of the magnitude of her mistake, remained frozen. She knew that she had just lost not only her authority on the plane, but also her professional credibility. And as Marcus finally entered the cockpit, greeted by a murmur of respect and admiration, a clear lesson resonated in the air: never judge someone by their skin color, and above all, never underestimate someone's true identity. No sooner had Marcus disappeared behind the cockpit door than the cabin erupted in commotion. Passengers exchanged glances, some chuckled quietly, others shook their heads in disbelief. Tiffany Reynolds, red-faced and trembling with shame, found herself isolated, aware that her reputation had just crumbled in a matter of minutes. Shortly afterwards, the cabin manager spoke, "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for what has just happened. The incident has been brought to the attention of management." A few hours later, at Bennett Aviation's offices, Tiffany was summoned by company executives. The seriousness of her behavior in front of the billionaire and the passengers was undeniable. She was immediately suspended for discrimination and breach of professional conduct. A mandatory training program on diversity and respect was implemented for all cabin crew. Social media was abuzz. The video of the incident, filmed by several passengers, had been shared thousands of times. Comments poured in, condemning Tiffany's behavior and praising Marcus Bennett's calm, dignity, and professionalism. He was no longer seen simply as a pilot or a billionaire, but as a symbol of composure and justice in the face of humiliation and prejudice. Marcus, from the cockpit, followed the reactions with an almost paternal calm. He knew that the real victory lay not in punishing Tiffany, but in the message sent: respect, competence, and dignity are non-negotiable, and no prejudice can shake a person who is sure of their worth. When Marcus landed in Los Angeles, he was greeted by several passengers who personally thanked him for his courage and dignity. Tiffany, on the other hand, now had to face the consequences of her actions. Her career had suffered an irreparable blow, and she understood, painfully, that arrogance and prejudice never lead to true authority. In the sky and on the ground that day, a lesson was etched for all: never judge someone by the color of their skin, never underestimate a person's worth, and above all, respect those who deserve respect. Marcus Bennett, pilot and billionaire, had not only flown a plane, but he had righted an injustice with elegance, patience, and intelligence. And as the plane rolled off the jetway, carrying passengers and lessons, a murmur still circulated in the cabin: "It's incredible, and he stayed so calm." Marcus, sitting in his cockpit, gave a slight smile. For him, true flight wasn't measured in kilometers traveled, but in dignity preserved in the face of adversity.